Hello and welcome to today's Beyond the Shelf Tween book discussion. My name is Mary Ann Wright and I'm a 4-H area educator for Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. Today we are continuing our discussion of The Secret Garden. So this week we were to read chapters 10 through 18 of the book, and we're going to discuss a little today and also ask some questions about what you think of the book so far, and then we will follow that up with an activity. So if we think back to chapter 10 where we started this week, the title of the chapter is Dickon. And this is where we finally meet Martha's younger brother, Dickon. And even though this is the first time we've met him in the story, it's almost like he is an old friend because we have already heard quite a bit about him through Martha's stories. So when we finally meet him and Mary finally meets him in the forest, leaning against a tree, and mesmerizing the animals around him, it's almost like we know him. So what was your first impression of Dickon? Well, I think Mary, when she met him in the story, it comes across that she starts out quite nervous around him. She doesn't really know how to act. She's not used to being around boys her age, even other children her age. So she's a little stiff, but we know that she quickly becomes very fond of him and very comfortable around him. So in the first chapter, we see that she actually starts to tell Dickon a little bit about the garden, and she reveals to him where it is. So this just proves to us how much she actually trusts him, and she wants to share this secret with him. So then we move in to the next chapter where they're exploring. We see Dickon's first impression of the garden, and he is sort of mesmerized just like Mary was. He really loves the garden and instantly takes a shining to it. And when he looks around, he tells Mary that he doesn't think the garden has been locked up for 10 years because he thinks it would be much wilder and overgrown. He feels like there has been somebody that has tended to it. But we know that it said that this garden has been locked for 10 years and no one's been in. So what are your thoughts on this? This just kind of is said once in the story and then we move on. So it's not really addressed, but I'm interested to know your point of view. And so if you want to comment and let me know what you think about who has been in the garden, if anybody. And then we move on to Dickon and Mary really coming up with a plan for the garden. So they decide they're going to come back and tend to the garden, and they want to make it really special. But they don't want it to be like every other garden in the grounds. And what do they kind of describe their garden looking like? Can you remember? So it said that they want to keep it a bit wild. They don't want those straight lines, those really manicured bushes and plants. They want it to be almost like it's grown this way naturally. So if you can envision how that looks, and especially next to a structured garden, if you've ever seen those in storybooks or photographs of that. So then we move on to the next chapter, and it is chapter 12, and it's entitled, Might I Have a Bit of Earth? So that kind of lets us know that something's going to happen and Mary's going to have an opportunity to ask somebody for earth. And so we know she's already talked to having a bit of a garden with Ben, the gardener, but he doesn't have the authority to give her that. But he kind of says that she can, not really mess anything up and play around where she would like. So we know that Mary returns home after gardening all day, playing in the secret garden with Dickon, and Martha's there to greet her, and she asks what she thinks about Dickon, and Mary just really says that she thinks he's beautiful. So I think this is interesting because that's not something that we use to describe people usually when we first meet them. So what do you think Mary means by that? Do you think she means his features? Because we know that Martha points out that his features are not what's considered beautiful by a lot of people, but Do you think it's the way he looks or more of the way he made Mary feel and how comfortable she is around him? So I'm interested to hear what you think about that. Then we move on, and Martha is waiting for Mary because we finally now get to meet Mr. Craven. So he is about to leave, but he wants to talk to Mary before he goes. So Mary is very nervous when she's getting ready for this because she hasn't ever met him, and he is her caregiver. So this can be kind of nerve-wracking because even though she comes across as not really caring much about what people think of her, we know that that is not true, that she does want to have friends, and she's starting to understand what that even means. So she meets Mr. Craven, and after talking with him, he asks her how she's doing, what she's likes about the house, and how she's keeping herself busy. And he also asks her if she needs anything or wants anything, and she asks for a bit of land. And this is kind of catches him off guard because this is not a typical request from a child. And in the story it says he looks at her and he kind of ponders, and he actually says that she reminds him of somebody. So who do you think that might be? So we know that Mr. Craven's wife really loved gardening. We know that she loved the rose garden that's now locked up. And I wonder if he's seeing parallels between Mary and his late wife. So even though it's not said for sure, I kind of have a feeling that's who Mary is reminding him of. Then we go to chapter 13, and it's entitled, I Am Colin. So who is Colin? We have no idea, but we find out this chapter. So Mary is asleep, but she is awakened in the middle of the night, and it's said by a wuthering wind. So a really wild wind woke her up. And we know that that strong wind comes off the moor and makes loud noises sometimes at night. And so Mary wakes up, but then she starts to hear other sounds. And again, it sounds like someone is crying and sort of wailing. So she decides she's going to go investigate. She's not scared at all. So I think that's kind of fun too, because Mary is only like a 10-year-old girl in this strange house, and it's the middle of the night, but she's not afraid. She goes and tries to find out what's there. So that just shows us how curious she is and how brave. So she actually finds the room, and she sees a boy laying there. And we find out his name is Colin. And so they kind of catch each other off guard. And so they're both startled, and they start to talk, and it's almost like they form an instant friendship. So it's interesting to see because all we know about this Colin is that he cries and that we haven't seen him yet, even though he lives in this same house. So they start to get talking to each other. They start visiting. And we know that Colin really takes a liking to Mary. So throughout the next couple of chapters, we see Colin's personality come through, and he is very demanding. He's used to getting his way. He treats people with very little respect, and that might sound similar to how we described another person in this story at the beginning. Do you remember? So that is very similar to how we described Mary at the beginning of the book. But as the story has gone on, she has begun to change a little bit, and her character has really developed. So now we're seeing somebody who is very similar to her just a few months ago. So we know that Mary and Colin continue a friendship. Mary said she'll return and see him again. But when we go into chapter 15, we know that Mary decides to go out on a pretty day and go to her garden. And there she sees Dickon again, and they spend all day, really cultivating and helping the garden become this beautiful place. And so Colin, who is used to getting his way, expects her to come, and she doesn't. So we see in chapter 16 that he is very upset when Mary doesn't come to see him. even though she returns after the end of the day. But by that point, he is very out of sorts. He throws her out and kind of sends her away. So Mary's pretty stubborn as well. So she goes, and she doesn't like the way he treats her. She's just going to be done with him. But then we hear him start to throw a tantrum at the end. And so Mary at first is kind of scared because she finally sees what this tantrum can be like. And it's kind of scary. But the more she listens, she kind of gets mad and angry because how dare he keep everyone up and go on like that. So she goes to his room after the nurse requests her to come and try to calm him down. And she lets him have it. She yells at him. And again, he's not used to this treatment. And so it almost startles him into being quiet and calming down. So it's exactly really what he needs for this. And so they decide that they are going to continue being friends. And Mary really sets him straight because she now pinpoints exactly why he has these tantrums, why he's so upset. And that's because he is afraid of his illness. He thinks he's sick. He thinks he's going to be a hunchback and have a bump on his back. And even though he doesn't have this right now, he's scared. And he's never told anybody this. And so when Mary reveals it to his nurse and some of the other people at the house, they realize that they could have been calming him down and really reassuring him this whole time. And so hopefully this is a turning point for him because now he can realize that he's not necessarily just going to die and be sick for his whole life. He has a choice and he can choose to get out and live a little bit. So Mary has told him now about the garden, and she finally revealed that she knows how to get in. So she's been keeping this piece of information from him, but she finally reveals it. So that's sort of where we finish off with chapter 18. And we know that they plan to take Dickon to the house to meet Colin, and then they plan to take Colin to the secret garden. So I'm anxious to see what happens kind of at the conclusion of the book. And we're going to be reading the last 9 chapters of the book for next week. So that will be chapter 19 through 27. So chapter 19 through 27, read that this week, and then tune back in for next week's discussion. So now we're going to move on to our activity. And today we are going to be making our own garden maze. And this is a fun idea that I found that I thought we could really theme this for Secret Garden Week. And so I'm going to start out with what you need for the project. The first thing is a box. So the boxes that work the best are going to be a cardboard box with a lid that comes over. And this could also be a pizza box. So that's what I have, is just a pizza box. So I have one of those. Then I need a ruler and a pencil, a box cutter, some straws. So if you don't have straws, you can use other things, but I'm going to use straws today. Then I have a pair of scissors, some tape, and some glue. And I'm going to be using both a glue stick and a hot glue gun today for this project. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your box, and if you're using a pizza box or something similar to a pizza box in the way it opens, so it usually opens like this, you're going to actually detach the top of this. And so you're going to be sure to leave this on the base. So you want the base to have 4 sides to the box still. So once you have that, then this part is not going to be attached. So we're going to use some tape to secure this. So we have almost like a tray that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to use a little bit of regular Scotch tape, but if you have some shipping tape or something like that, that might work even better. So once you have your base, your tray here, you're going to take your top piece. And so this is just the top of the pizza box. And what I did, I cut my pizza box sides just in half. So I went ahead and just took off probably about 3/4 of an inch of the pizza box lid. And you see I did that all the way around. I just trimmed that. And the reason we're doing this is because we want this to be a shallower depth than our base. And if you leave the pizza box as is, they are very similar in depth. So I just made it so my top is now a lot shorter. Now, I don't want my design on the pizza box to show, so what I'm going to do is flip it over and fold the sides the opposite way here. Then once I have that, I am going to fit it on the inside of the base of the box. So fit it right in there, and then when you do, you should have a pretty snug fit. It's going to look very similar to this. So you see I have a lip all the way around, but then I have this almost like a false bottom here on my box. Now this is going to be our maze. So this next part is the part where you really get to be creative, because we're going to design our maze. So what I did, I decided I wanted my endpoint to be the center and sort of like a secret garden. So it was enclosed except there was one opening. So that's where I started, and I used a ruler and a pencil, and I just sort of sketched out where I wanted my endpoint to be. And I made sort of a rectangle of where that final secret garden was going to be. So I made a rectangle, and then you can decide where your opening is going to be. And I just erased a little bit, about an inch, where the opening was going to be. Then I worked backwards. I decided now I'm going to make a maze to this point. So this will take some time. Just play around with this and discover how you want your maze to look. I used my ruler's width to be the width of my path, because this is actually going to be a marble maze. So we want a marble to be able to roll freely through our maze with room on both sides. So this ruler, or a little bit wider than a regular ruler, is the perfect width for our path. So go ahead and make your design, take time working on it, have a starting point, and you can decide if you want multiple ways to get to your final destination, or if there's only one way that you can actually make it to the garden. After you do that, I added a little bit of color to mine. I used a piece of green paper, and I put this on the base of the garden's rectangle and also at my starting point. That way when I look at my maze, it's very clear where to start and where I want to finish. So I just went ahead and cut a piece of paper the same size as that rectangle for my garden and glued it down with some glue. I used a glue stick for that. Next, you have all your lines for your maze. You have your start and end point, and now we need to make some obstacles. So for this, I made some circles, some holes in my box. So what I want to do is, after you have your path designated, you're just going to take a pencil and draw some circles. Now you want to make sure the circles are about the size of a penny, and that way your marble can drop through, but you want it still to have enough room around some of them so you actually can make it to your final destination. So do that, and then just carefully cut those circles out with your box cutter. And very, very careful with this. Cutting circles is difficult anytime, but especially in cardboard. So just take your time. Box cutters are really sharp, and so this will just slice through the cardboard. So you want to make sure that you have something underneath your box in case it goes through. You don't want to damage your work surface or your table. So have another cardboard box that's folded under it or something like that, so you have like a cutting mat. Then after you carefully cut your circles, you will have your obstacles, and you can always add more obstacles if this doesn't end up being as hard as you want it to be. But for mine, I put 6 different holes for my obstacles. Next, you need to add the walls to your path. And what I did is I used some straws. And for a box about the size of a pizza box, it's probably going to take you about 10 straws. So I just glued down my straws right where I drew my pencil lines. So I have a pair of scissors. You can just kind of place it, put your finger, and then cut your straw to the length that you need for your maze. And I glued down the straws with a hot glue gun, and you just place it right over there. If you don't have straws and you don't plan on getting out, if you have something like popsicle sticks, they work really well. You can stand those up for it to be your walls. You could also just use other pieces of cardboard. So the pieces of cardboard that you cut off from the lid, those would be the perfect height to use for your walls in your garden. So you can do that as well. Now, after you have all of your straws glued down, your maze is going to look similar to this. So depending on how you decided to have your maze, but this is what mine turned out to look like. So you see here by my paper, this is my starting point, and then this is my secret garden here in the middle. So I have to get my marble to the garden without going in any of these obstacles. So another reason using a box with a lid works really well is because it will give you a second layer. So when your marble falls through the obstacles, the holes, it will fall to the layer underneath. So since it does that, you're going to need to have a hole. So when you complete this, be sure to put a hole in the side. That way you can easily get your marble out. So my marble is in here now, so I'm just going to shake it out here, and you see it came right out. So if you want to reinforce, you can put some tape all the way around your box if you would like, but actually it works pretty well without tape, so you can start enjoying. So I'm going to try here to get my marble. I'm going to put it at the starting point, and then you're just going to move your box around and try. Oh, I ended up going in one of my obstacles, one of my traps. So again, you just get your marble from the exit point and you can start over. But this is a fun activity that you can do. You can share it with friends and families to see if they can get to the secret garden. You can time them, have races to see who can get there the fastest. And remember, if you decide, oh, this was too easy, I need to add more, you can always go back and cut some more holes and add different obstacles to your course. So I hope you try that. You can do different variations. You can really have a lot of fun with that. Use different types of boxes, different shapes, and see how that goes. But I hope you enjoyed today's activity, and I hope that you continue to read The Secret Garden with us. Remember, next week we are finishing the book, where we're going to be reading the final 9 chapters of the book. So go ahead and start reading and join us back next week. We're going to meet here at 1:30 next Thursday to wrap up The Secret Garden. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Bye-bye.